Hi, I'm Josh, and I am so grateful you've chosen to spend some of your very valuable time with me as I talk about the board games that I played in September 2023. This was another slow month in terms of gaming. I explained at the beginning of my previous board game video why this is the case. I only got 6 different games played, although 2 of them are new to me, so it'll be fun to talk about those. Let's get right to it. As usual, I'm going to go through these games in order of my lowest rated game to my highest rated game of the month. And we're going to start off with a very little abstract strategy game called Corridor. This is a game that my older son Evan had seen on my game shelf and had asked to try with me. And he had actually forgotten that a few years back we had played it a few times. This is actually one of the games I would bring along to swimming lessons so that when his younger brother Wyatt was doing his lessons, me and Evan could sit at a table and play this game. And so he had, I guess, forgotten that he had played this a few times before, but we pulled it out and played this 2-player again. And Evan does well with this type of game. He has a very strong strategic mind. He's very analytical and smart in that manner. Now, of course, I've played this game a bunch more than he has, so I still won both games that we played. And I rate this game a 6.5 out of 10. It's one that I enjoy playing occasionally, obviously not a favorite. And it's interesting, when I looked back on Board Game Geek at my past rating, I used to rate this game a 9 out of 10, I guess based on the fact that from a design point of view, there's really no fault to be found with the game. It's super simple. It's a highly tactical, no-luck game where you just use your wits and the few resources you got in front of you to win the game. And so, I mean, yeah, it's a well-designed game, but it's not the most fun game in the world. Not that I don't enjoy it, mind you, but again, just not a favorite. Next up is one of the new to me games, and that is Azul Summer Pavilion. Not that long ago, a few months back, Paul had pulled out his copy of Azul and introduced me to that game. And in that series of games, these Azul games, there are several with different themes and slightly different twists on the rule set, and Summer Pavilion is one of these sort of different takes on Azul. I found that the new things that were introduced in the game were quite interesting. My only real complaint with it was I felt the game ended too soon. I felt like I'd hardly built up any of my game tableau there. I felt like there's a lot of blank space, and if the game had been a couple rounds longer, I think it would have been maybe a little bit more satisfying. But overall, it's not a huge difference from original Azul. I give it the same rating as original Azul. I give it a 7 out of 10. Although, if I were to rank them, I would rank Summer Pavilion higher, and I would prefer to play this one because of the new things that are introduced with it. Paul rates the game 8 out of 10. And what's kind of cool is this is one that I got from the library, so I just borrowed it from the library for a week and tried it out and gave it back again. So that's kind of a fun way to try new games. Next, we got back to the game of Lands of Galzir that we had started in August, and I talked for a long time in my previous board game video about Lands of Galzir, so I won't get into it again here. But essentially, we had got through the first half of game 1 with myself, my 2 boys, and Paul. However, my older boy Evan dropped out after our first play, so going into the second half of this first game, it was me, Wyatt, and Paul who wrapped up the first game. Now, when I pulled out the app, it didn't appear to have saved our progress from the first half. So apparently, if you don't complete an entire game, your progress in the app gets lost. Now, it doesn't make a huge difference because you're still punching in specific numbers for the encounters you're having. So the only, I think, real difference is you have to start on a new random day, which might kind of confuse a couple of things. But I was disappointed the app didn't pick up where we had left it. At the end of the second play, Paul decided he wasn't interested in continuing with the game. I rate the game 7 out of 10. I think it's a really interesting storytelling game and has really interesting design elements with how it's all very much card-based and how things progress and change throughout the course of play. Paul only rates the game 4 out of 10. He says it's a cool design, but just not for him, just not his cup of tea. I'm not sure if Wyatt will be interested in continuing the game with me. It's one that I think would be really enjoyable to explore further, but we'll have to see how it goes. The next game is the other new to me game, and this is called Acropolis, and it's a relatively new game release that Paul and I got to actually play online through the site Board Game Arena. We were going to play a much older game called Tuluva on Board Game Arena, but when I looked at the rules, I thought, you know, this whole tile stacking thing reminds me of this new release, Acropolis, that I had seen, and Acropolis looked a little more interesting to me. So instead I learned the rules to Acropolis and we gave it a try, and Paul and I both love games involving spatial puzzles. However, for whatever reason in this particular game, the first 2 times we played it, I crushed him. And that's a pretty rare event. Paul beats me in games more often than I beat him, so whatever it was about this particular spatial puzzle, it kind of worked with the way I think, I guess. I will say that playing Acropolis in an online format on Board Game Arena is just not a good way to play the game. I mean, for one thing, you're manipulating tiles and trying to fit them into spaces, plus you're building them up in a 3D format so that you can actually have 3 levels of tiles that are placed on your game tableau area, and it is really hard for me to visualize on the website when I'm looking at the game which are level 1, 2, or 3, and I have to kind of move things around a fair bit to see, oh yeah, that's on the second level of the pile there. Whereas if you're playing in person, you can just take a tile in hand, manipulate it, try it out in different spots, easily see where those levels are happening. And the whole online experience I found made it really difficult. There is an option you can turn on where there is a faint colored border on the second and third levels, like there's a faint pink on the second level tiles and then a faint purple on the third, but they could have made that a lot clearer. Like I said, it's still very hard to tell just by looking at it online what levels they're at. And so I would love to play this game in person. I'd be happy enough to continue playing it online, of course, too, because I rate the game 7.5 out of 10. Paul also rates it 7.5 out of 10, so we both did enjoy it quite a bit. But I found I was hindered by the electronic format, and I'm sure this would have a lovely tactile feel to handling all the tiles, too. It looks like one of those games that is fun to kind of play around with. In the month of September, Paul and I also played several more games of My City, the Reinhard Knizia Legacy campaign game. I mentioned in my August Games video that I had fallen way behind very early in this campaign, and I finally did win a couple of games in the month of September, but I'm still way behind in the overall campaign score. And it's you know, as much as I do truthfully say that the enjoyment of board games for me is not in the winning, it's in the playing, it is very disheartening to be playing a campaign game and to know you have almost a 0% chance of winning the campaign when you're, you know, less than halfway through it. By the end of September, we were getting close to completing the campaign. We had completed 21 out of the 24 overall games that are played. There are 8 chapters, each divided into 3 quick games. And I do enjoy each new twist that's added as you get into each chapter. It does change the game up a little bit, adds interesting things to focus on. Although the other kind of, I guess, downside of this game is the theme is pretty grim. For one thing, it has this horrible tagline, "Manifest Your Destiny," I think it is, which references a not so great aspect of history. And the gameplay also kind of is a little rough in that you start off with this beautiful natural world full of trees and mountains and beauty. And as the campaign progresses, you are cutting down those forests, as you're industrializing, you're destroying the natural resources in order to build up My City. And so while the gameplay itself is very fun, when you kind of step back and think about the theme for a second, you're like, oh, you know, what we're doing here isn't awesome. However, we're obviously enjoying ourselves because we've knocked off 21 plays in just a few months, and I do rate the game 8 out of 10. Paul also rates it 8 out of 10. Before I get to the number 1 game of the month, let me send out a quick thank you to my Patreon supporters, especially to my higher tier supporters, Charles M, Abe O, Saver Girl, Mojo Dam, Joanna N, and my highest supporter of all, Asmondus Perfect. It really means the world to me that you're willing to support me in that way. For any of you who have the means, feel free to check out my Patreon. If you want to support me for free, a quick subscribe and a thumb up really goes a long way to supporting me as well in my YouTube endeavors here. So my number 1 game of the month is, again, Battles of Westeros. By the end of September, we completed 9 games of the 10-game base game campaign. I finally won a game here too, even if it was just by 2 victory points, with only 3 units of my entire army surviving at the end of the game. And then when we played again in September, I won once again by just 2 points. I won 20 victory points to 18. So in an overall campaign where I've been getting crushed pretty regularly, I managed to squeak out a couple of narrow victories, so that was kind of satisfying. I'm really having a lot of fun with this game, with this campaign overall. I rate it 9 out of 10. Paul rates it 8 out of 10. And that's everything I played in September. Now it's your turn to let me know what you've been playing. What games have you been most enjoying recently? Are there any upcoming titles you're really excited to try out? I love to hear about all that stuff, so please leave me a comment and I will be sure to read it and respond. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Cheers. This is a game that Evan had seen on... This is the game that my older son Evan had seen on my game shelf and asked to play with. A little kind of board game with only 3 of my... When you start kind of